Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Today is the seventh day of January 2021. Um, it's hard to believe we're actually in a new year. And I had a request from an individual last night to talk about something I was talking about earlier. And it was to do with the issue of what is an unincorporated town or a community compared to a city that is a corporation. Well, one of the telltale signs for me when I was younger, and you still see it, when you go into, if you're driving along the highway, you actually have the opportunity to already discover that what their sign says, City Charlotte, North Carolina, for example, and it'll say incorporated below that. So what they're telling you simply is that they are a corporation. They are there to, in some ways, make money. And those that live there are given what we would call, some would call benefits. Others would be detrimental to them because they had to pay not only a county tax, but also a city tax. Many of those who push this idea of, living in the city is to, well, we have these services to help you with. Oh, really? Well, mainly the services are to do with garbage. In other words, they'll pick up your garbage without charge, but in reality, you are charged because you pay a tax. You also are given what they call a sewer system, so you do not have to have, in most county residents in where I live at, they have a septic tank, which they're responsible for to keep up upkeep. While in the city, you don't have that apparatus. See, other things simply is the amenities would be simply is that they have fire department and the police services. In other words, again, this is all they're talking about their benefits, but in reality, most county residents have those benefits too. And the other thing simply they'll say they have city water. Well, part of this is also the cities have to develop what they call a charter. In other words, just paperwork. Okay, this is how it all starts, that we're going to claim that we are a city and these are our boundaries and these are the people who live in our city, and they have to put up these signs on the road saying you're entering city limits, meaning there are different rules here on the road. So you may encounter what I call driving into town. You're driving into the city. Before you get into the city, it's 45 or 55 miles per hour. But when you get to the city limit sign, there'll be a warning, a couple of warnings. There are warnings saying simply the speed limit now is 35 or 25 miles per hour or 30 miles per hour. So you have to adjust your speed limit in order to enter those communities, that is the city. Or else you will face the penalty of either being pulled over and given a ticket. Most cities, like here where I live at, the county is named Aiken, spelled Aikaen, in South Carolina. They are giving also what they call a county seat. A county seat is basically a mini word for capital of the county in which you live. In other words, it's where all the business of government takes place. All county seats have a courthouse. All county seats have some form of the jurisdiction that is throughout the whole county. So, say, for example, you get caught, depending on who you get caught by. Mainly, you have what I call two deals here. You have the sheriff who basically and his deputies who take care of the county, and then if you're in the city, you have what they call the police department. And so if you are pulled over in the county and you're not in a jurisdiction, the jurisdiction means simply is you're not in a community that is a town or a city. So in reality, I got caught many years ago for speeding in a town. which was a unincorporated town. Let me explain what I mean by unincorporated here so you can really figure it out. Usually, in an unincorporated town, you do not have what I call any police department. You may have one person or two people in those towns that actually do that, but most likely you don't. And so these unincorporated areas where I live in South Carolina have the jurisdiction goes to the county, that is the sheriff's department. Another apparatus that actually deals with what I would call being in the city is that they have a mayor, that they have a city council. So they have a form of government in that city. They are responsible. They're what we call bureaucratic officers, is what I call them. Just, most of this is, you could do this without, you don't even need this really, but this is what happens. So you have bureaucratic officers who get paid money to rule over you. And so where I'm located at here in Aiken, I don't live in a city. So the jurisdiction is that I'm not a part of that. But the mayor is pretty much a figurehead, and he's not the one with the power. In some communities that are actually cities that are incorporated, the mayor does have power. But that's changed dramatically in the last 50 to 40 years. The mayor is no longer considered he's just basically a figurehead. He speaks in public and says, "Hey," at the Christmas parade or some event such and such. But he's not really. So most of now the delegation is due to what I would call a city manager, who manages the bureaucracy of the city. When I came here to Aiken in 1975 from North Carolina at 15 years old, there are still the buildings that what I would call county buildings, but they're really actually just very small buildings on a street here. And what would take place is how this worked was with the county and how to get your road to be dealt with. In other words, how it would be scraped. There are many roads here in this county that are what I would call dirt roads. And periodically they will be scraped in order to make the road more drivable. Some of those roads eventually will get paid based upon county taxes. And that happens. And sometimes people petition to do that, and that takes place. But the key is the bureaucratic nonsense of what takes place in a city. Because there's so many people hired now in a city jobs that actually are not beneficial to the people. And let me explain. When I needed to, quote unquote, call the people to scrape my road, I would just simply call a phone number, call them and say, "Here's where I live at. I need you to come here and scrape the road." And that would be it. And they would say, "Okay, we'll schedule you to come out here in the next couple of weeks and we'll be out there." That was it. That was, you see, they wrote it down, and there was no bureaucrats. There was no apparatus. And let me explain where the difference between what I call, I grew up in the South, very much a Southerner. We don't need the government. Okay, that's my thinking. It's always been that way, because I am the government. You see, I take responsibility. This is almost gone. People don't want to take responsibility anymore. So, for example, here in the city, in the city, there would be what I call private enterprise. What I mean by that simply is people would have a park. It was not paid for by the taxpayers. It was someone who's in his goodness of his heart decided, "Hey, I'll build a baseball field." Okay. And this would be a baseball field for people, the boys can come out and play baseball, or a soccer field, whatever. That was taking place in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. And then that gradually changed in the 1960s because we had to become modern, so to speak. And so we had to have some kind of apparatus and build something for the people. So a lot of times the parks now are sometimes were given to the city from someone, and now they're managed by the city, you see. And that means more bureaucrats. That means more employees. That means simply is you have to charge more money to pay your employees and the machinery that goes along with this. So in reality, simply is that this town here is actually a cosmopolitan city in some ways, because it's many transplants came here from the north to do their horse training here in Aiken. Aiken is considered one of the prime spots to train horses in the wintertime that you couldn't do in the winter. And there are many people who come here to operate stables, that is, for the horses, that actually, quote unquote, they have it here for about 6 months per se, and then they have it by March. They have basically a triple crown here, and then when that takes place, they're gone, and they're gone for the rest of the year until the winter months come back. In fact, Aiken was considered a winter colony for people that I'll call the Yankees, who come to here for their sports to here. Mainly these were well-to-do people. So what originated here is that it was a very simple life, and then what happened simply is that this is the apparatus that many Southerners do not like, that is older Southerners, that simply is that the attitude is simply is we just have to do it better. And so we bring in they bring their ideas into the South and said, this is the way we do it, and it's better. In reality, it's not better. If I had a problem, like I said, with a road or something else, I needed something done, I just simply call someone. The secretary would take the message, relay that to the guy who works, either a supervisor or superintendent, whatever, who had either was working there or know simply is, I'm going to be here, I'm going to such and such scrape your road. That's it. They didn't have to have any paperwork. None of that shit, you see. And I use that word shit because this is what goes on now. You got people who work that just simply do paperwork. They move paper from one pile to another pile. It's asinine. It is. But people get paid for it, you see. And so they're important. And so this is part of the Southern perspective that I look at compared to other parts of the country. That's almost gone because most people now move to the South simply because of the better climate here and the weather, so to speak, than actually up north when it's wintertime. And there are people who actually are seasonal people who actually come here in the winter because it's not as bad here as it is up north. The temperatures are far more mild here. It's a subtropical area. It's not tropical. It's not like Florida. Florida is considered tropical in many ways, that it stays just about the same temperature all the time. But anyway, this is subtropical. So you have certain things here that are basically more subtropical, tend to be like in Florida, but not quite, because the weather does freeze here. So like for oranges, they're not grown here. It's too cold, but you can grow peaches here. You can grow apples here, that type of thing. So, but anyway, so what happens simply is that you have more bureaucrats, more bureaucracy, more paperwork, which is all third person. It's not first person. It's not, it's not dealing with what I call, it's just on paper. A lot of these rules this is why I'm very much against what we see, this whole apparatus upon us, is this all paper. This is rules and regulations. When in reality, we don't have to have any rules and regulations as long as we simply look at natural law. And when you look at natural law, simply is very clear. It's just one rule: do unto others as you would like to be done yourself. How they treat you. That's all you got to do. Very simple. Jesus spoke about that. We don't need all these rules that are put in books and actually more and more laws. We have tons and tons of laws because lawyers write these things, you see, because they're important, supposedly. But in reality, simply is they just restrict your freedom. That's what they do. Laws restrict your freedom. They're saying basically you're not capable of actually controlling yourself. And so when you're not able to do that, we have all these laws. And so they treat you like a slave. So back to the unincorporated area, simply is that the jurisdiction, they may have a policeman, may not. They may have a mayor. I doubt it, because simply is they don't need a mayor, you see. They don't need the apparatus that a bureaucracy of a city that's a corporation. When I say incorporation, it just simply means that they are there to make a profit. That's what it is. That's what they do. That's why they have taxes. So when you live in the city, like I said earlier, you pay not only county taxes, but you pay for city taxes. You pay for the amenities to be in that town or city. There are actually probably in this county, I think there are 3 or 4 what I call cities. The rest are towns. And so the towns simply don't have all this paperwork. They don't have a mayor. They may have what I call volunteers who don't get paid. They simply do things because they wanted to serve others. And that's the way it should be, you see. And so when I went to the bank yesterday, which I knew it was in an unincorporated area, I knew they were not regulated. They were not under the jurisdiction of a city. So I knew this simply is that they would put on the outside of their building, simply please wear a face mask if you enter this building. But they cannot enforce it because they don't have jurisdiction, because there's no jurisdiction in an unincorporated area. And that's the way it should be. Because in reality, simply is they restrict you. So like when I posted my short video on Monday about the whole apparatus that when I was in here, the city of Aiken, I was told that I had to, first of all, I have some questions for you. In other words, I'm looked upon as now this is the key thing here for people to understand. When someone says something, they're going to have to ask you some personal questions. They're invading your private sphere. You don't have to answer them. See, that's what this is all about. You see, it's an attitude as though I've got jurisdiction over you. No, you don't. You think you do, but you don't. And so this is why people, they just simply, okay, what are the questions? Well, I need to find out have you checked your temperature today? That type of thing. Or have you been sick? Do you have any family members that have been sick? All this craziness, you see. No, it's none of your damn business. If I was sick, I wouldn't be here. I mean, this is common sense, folks. This is very much common sense, and how we've gone away from common sense is ridiculous. And so in other words, you, the bank, are going to tell me what to do. Now, I know that simply is the bank was not doing this. They were being pushed by the city, since it's all this scare that we have here that's going on, is to basically to keep people in fear. And so what happened was simply is that, no, I don't have to deal with you at all. I can go elsewhere. There are other banks, and I can go to unincorporated area. Now, I didn't tell her that. I don't have to. None of her business. I just told her, no, I don't have to wear a mask. And she said, yes, you do. And I says, no, I don't. You see, this is the craziness that's going on, that somehow you can spread disease to other people by simply breathing. Well, if that's true, we would all be dead, period, before we even actually became, we're able to walk. This is nonsense. So back to the whole thing about unincorporated areas, simply is that when I went in the bank, there were the people there were tellers at the bank. One was wearing a mask, one was not. See, they cannot force people to do this because they don't have jurisdiction. They can't. In a city, they would. So when I went in the city with this bank, they already had masks on, you see. They no longer now will take money from their tellers, that is from the cars. In other words, one of the most advantageous thing to do is simply people would deposit their money by going in their car, which is most people don't have this in the rest of the world, is what I understand. I know that people in Australia don't. I had a friend who came here. She told me, no, we don't have that. You have to walk in the bank. I said, you got to walk in the bank? She says, yes. Well, all I'm doing is depositing money, see? But anyway, that's another story. The key is you need to know who you are, because they will ask you all kinds of questions, and you just basically say it's none of your business, and it isn't none of their business. You see, they see you as a threat, but in reality, they are the threat. You see how the tables turn here? You see, you've been so programmed, you've been so propagandized to not understand simply as, oh, it's by the goodwill of me, I have to tell you this information, when in reality it's volunteered. And I don't have to volunteer to tell you anything. It's none of your damn business. And it isn't. And that's what the problem is. People capitulate. They simply feel threatened and they give information, you see. So they're the threat. You're not the threat. They are. And that's how you have to see it. And so this is why sometimes I want to go to the grocery store. Yesterday, again, I went to the grocery store, are in the city here where I live at. And I just say to myself, I'm the authority here. They are not. And my mind makes that up, tells myself that. And my aura, when I walk into a grocery store, tells everybody around me that you don't need to bother this guy. That's how powerful you are. You need to understand that. You really do. Because in reality, you're saying simply is, I'm not of this world, which you're not. You're not of this world. Many of us don't. Many want to stay in this world, but you're not of this world, you see. And so what happens simply is that people give in. They put on a mask simply because everybody else is doing it. This is part of what I call the crowd induction too, that basically people fall into, and I've got to do this. Oh, such and such. When you're actually being blamed for something you haven't done. You're being seen as a enemy from the state. That's what you're being seen as. You have some kind of disease. No, I don't. You see, I wouldn't even be there if I was sick. You see, but they have to step in. This is the way all bureaucratic people are. They see themselves, oh, I'm doing what to help people. In reality, simply, they're actually making things worse. They think they're doing good, but they're doing harm. So I think mainly that was one other thing. The viewer that asked me to answer this question is from the state of Pennsylvania. And I remember going through the state of Pennsylvania a few times, and it is considered a commonwealth. There are actually 4 particular states that are considered commonwealths, that are Massachusetts, Kentucky, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. I know that simply is that things are set up completely different in the state of Pennsylvania. It really was a kind of a quagmire to me. It didn't make any sense that you come into a certain area and they have this sign up, and you go for maybe not even a quarter of a mile and you're out of it. And they would call it, I think, a township is what it's called there, or a community, as well as I recollect. Now, I could be wrong. It's been many years since I've been to Pennsylvania. Last time I was there was to be at the Gettysburg battle site, and also in York, PA. So I'll take you back. I actually have been to Philadelphia also in the most recent times. But the key is that in an unincorporated area, like there are 3-4 cities here, if there's a bank or drugstore or a grocery store in those unincorporated towns, they cannot force you to wear a mask. They cannot. You see. And so they don't have the power to do that. You see. So when you go to these towns, these cities, I should say, that are corporation, you actually, in a lot of ways, should actually speak louder by simply says, I will no longer go in these communities anymore because I'm not going to pay tax money to these people, such and such. This would allow the destruction of the cities to deteriorate. But, what I mean by that simply is, well, you have to have cities. No, you don't. We need to get back to what I call simply back to rural world. We need to be able to, quote unquote, grow our own food and be responsible for ourselves, and no longer be dependent upon some grocery store or grocery chain, where they fly in the food from somewhere, South Africa or Argentina or whatever, to here and say it's fresh, when in reality it's not fresh. It's not fresh at all. And where is it being, grown at? Oh, a factory farm. It's not grown by people who really genuinely care about the soil. And that has to change also, you see. And so I also went into other grocery. I went in somewhere elsewhere also yesterday, and no one said anything to me. But the threat was simply when someone at the bank did that, my regard says to, no, you don't have jurisdiction over me. You're out of your jurisdiction. This is not your responsibility. But I know what the bank is doing. The bank is doing this simply is to, quote unquote, because they have to obey the city ordinances, you see. What a sad situation we have become. We have become fearful of one another just because of some phony disease out here that really no one's really dying of. You see, it's all fiction. So I'm going to do another video, and I'll do that here when I finish this one up, which I'm about finished. I hope that I've been answered the people's questions. Again, there's no charter in these unincorporated areas. There's no council, city council. They may have a town council if they do, but it's not paid. Usually it's done voluntarily. There is usually in these communities, sometimes there is some tax they have, sometimes they don't have a tax. In the county I live here, the state tax, I think, is 6% here in the state of South Carolina. So all residents in South Carolina have to pay what I call a 6% sales tax unless it's on food. And I don't know what it is on automobiles. It's different on automobiles, cars and stuff like that. And so the other is 3%. One of that 1% goes to schools as well, public schools or education. 1% I think goes to hotels, and 1% goes to these unincorporated areas, as well as I recollect. So there is, I remember there's a town here. There's the city of North Augusta. There's the city of Aiken. And then there's a city that's called Burnett Town, which is, this is one thing I've forgotten. That's what this whole thing about city limits is. City is always looking for ways to get money. And a lot of times they promise people more than they really can deliver. And so what happens simply is that they want to expand their city limits to get more residents. And let me tell you something. When I was involved in a business, you have to pay a retail city license to be a business. This is crazy, isn't it? You got to pay you have to pay a city license tax to be not incorporated, but just to be in business. So that's another way they make money. So back to the city, this is why they expand and take over certain areas, and people are gullible. You have to say yes to this. You'll be contacted and say, do you want to be in the city limits or not? And you say, no, I don't. So they can't. And the key is that those that say yes, they're putting more bondage in themselves than before. The other thing, the way it works, and the city here got in trouble with the state. It shows, and this is how the lines are. The lines have to connect. And what I mean by that is it's like a highway per se. So each house has to connect. So it can't jump across another house. Say that my house is, I don't want to be city taxes. So I say no. So that's as far as they can go. They cannot go to the next house next door to me and say, do you want city taxes or not? They can't do that. But they tried to do that, and they did it. They jumped across not only one's house, but actually jumped a half a mile. And the state came in and said, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. And I remember the reply of the city councils. And this is how you got to listen to me here, folks. Listen. Well, it's too bad we got caught. See, they don't care. All they care about is money, you see. So, when someone asks you to be in the city, you need to tell them no, and you need to tell them, hell no, I'm not going to be a part of this. But this is how they try to do these things. The state prevented this from happening because they knew they were out of their jurisdiction. They were trying to take over certain areas of areas that they wanted to make more money at, you see. They wanted to continue to spread further and expand. Because, see, that's what they want is money. And so I know that people that in my house simply is I pay such and such amount of money on property tax. But if you're in the city, you pay more. You pay more. Usually it's almost double. So if, say, for me, it's $300, the same house may be in the city, maybe close to $500 to $600 property tax, you see. And then you go like these here, you go like, the state of South Carolina doesn't charge tax on food. That is, you go to the grocery store, there's no tax on any food, period. That was done away with about, I think, 10 or 12 years ago, maybe a little longer. They decided that's not what they need to do. They got out of it. Now, if you get some other thing like a tire or a Verity or whatever, they're going to charge you tax on it because it's not food. So, like, for example, Walmart, you go in and buy, 99% of the stuff is food, but then you buy something like a computer thing, then guess what? You're charged tax on that. So anyway, I appreciate you listening. I hope that I've given you a good, clear definition of what unincorporated areas are and compared to incorporated areas. Anyone that has Inc. behind it, INC, is saying they're incorporated. Anyone who has what I call a trademark is part of the whole thing. That's part of actually a business. For example, here is a trademark. See this? Do you see the trademark? I do. The trademark is Nature's Way. That's the name of the thing. But notice it's a leaf. That's their trademark. And they have to get approval to actually do business in this world like this. So that's how they do it. So these companies that do this have to have a trademark. Sometimes you'll have what they call an R behind it. It means they're registered. Most people don't even know this. To me, it was just common knowledge. But anyway, appreciate you listening, and you have a good day. Thank you.